Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on Arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. It has been a football-packed few days since Euro 2024 kicked off last week. I've been enjoying it, I have to say. Football without jeopardy, without peril, without all the stress and anxiety that comes with watching Arsenal games. I have to say it's been very enjoyable from that perspective, but also it has, for the most part, been a very, very enjoyable tournament. A few games here and there, of course, which haven't been great, but there's been a lot of action, a lot of good goals, some late drama, some underdog stuff. It's been a lot of fun, and hopefully there's more to come. And let's not forget as well that Copa America kicks off today, tomorrow, tonight, depending whenever it is that you're listening to this. It may well have kicked off already. It probably has. 2 Arsenal players involved there for Brazil, Gabriel Martinelli and Big Gabby as well at the back. So we'll keep an eye on what they're doing over the coming days. If you want to keep up with the Euros, we are doing an almost daily podcast for you over on Patreon. I think we have done one every single day of the Euros so far. We'll have to see how the weekend plays out, but we'll do our best. And if you'd like to sign up to get access to that and all the other stuff that we have for you on Patreon, you can do it at patreon.com/Arseblog. That is patreon.com/Arseblog. Right, let's get on with today's show. We're going to talk a little bit about the Premier League fixtures that were released in midweek and just have a quick chat about those. But today's show is a statement-style podcast, and with me to do that is Andrew Allen. Hello, Andrew.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. You enjoying the Euros so far?
Yeah, it's been fun, hasn't it?
Yeah.
There's been some real cracking games in there. A couple of slightly boring ones, but yeah, I've been doing my best to kind of watch as much as possible without hogging the TV to death. And obviously, some of the games are during work hours, so it's like having them on the phone on the background and stuff.
Yeah. But no, your priority and your focus is work, of course.
Of course. Sorry, Nigel.
Well, there's plenty more to come from that tournament. I did want to start today by just touching on the fixture list. The Premier League fixtures were released during the week, and it's a pretty, can we say, interesting start for Arsenal. I don't want to say it's difficult. It might look like it's difficult, but you've got to accept the challenge of having to play these teams at some point during the season. It's a relatively friendly start for our first game, taking nothing for granted, of course, but we're at home against Wolves. That's then followed by Aston Villa away, Brighton at home, and after the interlull, the first interlull of the new season, we have a North London derby away from home, then Manchester City away from home with a Champions League game in the middle of those, and as yet we don't know if that's going to be home or away either. So it's straight into the meat and drink of it. There's no easing yourself into this season, is there? No,
I think the moment I saw the fixtures, my sort of heart rate went up a little bit, kind of a reminder of the tension to come. I guess, having experienced the title challenges of the last 2 seasons and knowing there's so little room for error, that when you see a start like that, you're immediately nervous because you kind of feel like, geez, if it went badly, you could actually be cut adrift quite early. And I'm not saying that's going to be the case. I feel quite confident that, we'll be ready for the challenges ahead. I think that the mentality of the squad these days is such that they know that there's no room for error. So it does, I guess, bring a slightly interesting focus to the transfer window as well, I guess, because you kind of want to have a pretty settled understanding of what you've got to play with before you hit some of those massive games, right?
Yeah, that's true, but we are in the middle of the Euros. The Copa America is about to start. The transfer window really hasn't got going yet, and at this point Arsenal don't know when all of their players are going to be back from those international tournaments and who they're going to have available for the start of the season. But I do think you're right that perhaps the moves that you can make in the transfer market, I was going to say you could bring these players in and they might be able to pick up some of the slack, but maybe some of the players that you're looking at are also involved in those European tournaments and have to go on a bit of holiday after their countries go out. So it is a complicated one, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of mad thinking that actually we'll have an interlull before we even get to that Spurs away game as well. So you know, it is actually quite a distance away. You know, it's September the 14th is 2 months after the Euros finish. You'd hope that players would be up and running by then, but at the same time, you know, those earlier games, the Wolves and Villa ones, yeah, who knows? We'll see what happens. Yeah. But it's definitely tricky. You know, if you were going to pick a start, you'd much prefer to ease into things, I think, and sort of scatter some of those fixtures, sort of as and when over the course of the season. But ultimately, you know, everyone has to play everyone. And there are other periods of the season where I guess on paper it looks a little bit more friendly compared to what we've had before.
Yeah. I mean, I found the run-in last season quite stressful because of the quality of the teams that we were having to play, right? And it's not that we don't have some difficult games in the run-in. If you look at the run from April 1st, after we play Chelsea in mid-March, there's another international break, but then you've got Fulham at home, Everton away, Brentford at home, Ipswich away, Palace at home, Bournemouth at home, then you've got to go to Anfield, you've got Newcastle at home and Southampton Southampton away as well. So I mean, it's not, it could be worse in terms of a run-in. There's some difficult games in there, but if you can be there or thereabouts at the start of April, you can be, I think, based on what we've seen from this team, relatively confident that they can put a run together in that group of fixtures, which, you know, could get us over the line. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, playing a team in form can be as difficult. You know, it can be difficult whenever it is. I mean, last season when we played Villa away, they were on that ridiculous run of sort of winning at home, weren't they? And then when we played Newcastle away, they were also kind of, you know, quite up for it and in a decent patch of form. So it's kind of, you can look at the fixture list and look at the teams and go by reputation and obviously their previous league finishes and all the rest of it. And I'm sure the supercomputer will be doing all of its mathematics and all the rest of it. But, you know, you can't really register the fact that, you know, someone like Ipswich might be on a 5-game winning run at the beginning of the season because, you know, for whatever reason. And, you know, they suddenly become a much harder prospect on paper than you thought. So we'll see. I mean, it's exciting, isn't it? I mean, what we have coming up is a season full of expectation again. You know, we're not dreading it. We're not worried about, you know, dropping out of the top 4 or anything like that. You know, we have a very good squad. We've proved over 2 years that we're capable of going toe to toe with Man City and Liverpool. And we have a very good chance, I think, this year of really pushing again. And I mean, let's just one game at a time, as Arteta would say.
Well, that's it. You know, I was thinking, watching the Euros this week and, you know, thinking about the Copa America and the players who are going to be away for that kind of thing. That Mikel Arteta, when he comes back from whatever bit of holidays he's had, and obviously back to the transfer war room with Edu, and like, he and his coaching staff are going to come back absolutely refreshed and ready to go and full of enthusiasm for the new season. And that will also be true of some players who haven't been involved in European competition. They will have had a decent break, and, you know, Ben White's been away, Martin Odegaard's been away, you know, big players who haven't been involved in tournaments. But I do wonder, you know, the challenge of not just maintaining the level that we had last season, but improving it. That's what the challenge is, right? I'm not saying that's necessarily what we have to do, but I'm sure, you know, every season you're looking for more, you're looking for better, you're looking to improve and to make your team stronger. The challenge then for Mikel Arteta in this summer, with so many players who are away at the Euros, it will be about, how do you wipe the slate clean for those guys when it feels, or might feel for many of them, like they haven't had much of a break at all?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, these guys are really being pushed to the limit physically at the moment. And when you look at how this calendar is going to shape up, they really aren't going to have any mental downtime at all in the period between the first interlull and Christmas. You know, they are going to be playing every 3-4 days. I don't know. I mean, I think after the Euros, some will have played quite a lot. Some won't have played nearly as much as others. I think there is that real sense of a family atmosphere at Arsenal at the moment. And I do think that the players will be excited to get back together. I think it will be the job of obviously Edu and the coaching staff, but also those players who haven't been away to get everybody up and motivated for things. I think maybe the injection of a couple of youngsters as well will be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously they go off to America, and I think the passion of the fans when they get out there will lift them as well.
Yeah.
I think there's plenty of ways that they can get them going again. I mean, they're also very young. They're not kind of lots of aged legs, over 30s who are sort of struggling to get out of bed in the morning. These guys are right in the prime of their fitness. And
sure.
I hope, maybe with a couple of new signings in there as well, that we can get everybody quite pumped up. I mean, there are some fringe guys who I think are going to start pre-season with us who will probably be wondering what their future holds. But I guess, again, without some of the big stars who are away at the international tournaments, there will be a kind of opportunity for them to maybe stake an early claim to some minutes in the pre-season games and build some momentum. You're looking at Fabio Vieira and Emil Smith-Rowe and I think those guys in particular, and who knows what's going to happen with Reece and Eddie. But yeah, I think there's a maturing group there who should be able to cope with all of that.
Okay, well, we are going to do, in this particular episode, as I said at the beginning, we're going to do some statements. We took these from our Discord members, so thank you very much to everybody who contributed. Basically, I give you a statement. You either have to strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree with it. No fence sitting.
For a man who sits on the fence sitting all the time.
This is it. Hey, listen, if Clive can do this format, you can do this format. No problem at all, right? So let's kick off with a nice easy one from JMart91, who says, we won't be signing anyone until at the earliest the Euros and Copa America finish.
Does that mean that the end of the tournament? So literally the final game has been...
Yeah, okay. I guess so. That's what finish means, yeah.
Disagree.
Okay.
I don't think Spain are going to win the tournament, and we have to buy David Raya. So I think that paperwork could be...
Oh, look at you. Smart.
Yeah. I think that deal will go through. If it's not Raya, no, I don't think we'll be signing anyone who's not already played for the club.
Okay.
I just can't see it happening. I think, there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts. I think there's probably a fair amount of work to go on behind the scenes if agents aren't picking up the phone at the moment. I don't see anyone but Raya signing before the end of the major European tournament.
Right,
anyway.
Interesting. I'm also going to disagree, but I do think we might bring somebody in apart from David Raya, the technicality that you've exploited there so very well. But I think we might. If I was to sort of flip the question, do you think we'll sell anyone before the end of the Euros or the end of the Copa America? Because there are some players, in the departure lounge, some players that we might be willing to let go. Or does this feel, like Arsenal aside, like it might be a summer where, because of the international tournaments, because it might take a while for things to get moving, that this is going to be a very August-heavy transfer window?
I mean, there are people within the squad that I think could go 100% could go before pre-season starts, and that would be loan guys like Lokonga, Tavares. I was going to say Tierney, but that looks increasingly unlikely now. So I would say those three absolute, two candidates there. I think the other guys, I think they're going to hold on as long as possible. I think they'll be with us through pre-season. We're going to be pretty light through pre-season, especially those early weeks. You look at the goalkeeper situation. I mean, I know James has reported that Karl Heinz signing a new deal, but we actually don't have any other goalkeepers. We've got to sign potentially a goalkeeper there. I guess that actually could be an interesting one for you for the previous part of the question, which is, could you see us signing someone? But I think the fringe guys, Vieira, Nketiah, Nelson, I think they'll hang on through pre-season, and then there'll be quite a lot of late business this year. Yeah,
I tend to agree with that. Okay. Mr. Snrub says, we will have a slow start to the league and see surprise choices in starting 11s because of fatigue from last season and the summer internationals?
Agree that we might have a slow start. I don't think we're going to win 5 or 6 on the bounce. Come out the traps that quickly, just because of the nature of the opposition. I think I could easily see us beating Wolves. I think if we got a draw away at Villa, that would be reasonable. Win against Brighton, Spurs, you could draw. City, you could draw. I think it's going to be hard to build momentum. And I think actually coming through those games unscathed is almost more important than necessarily putting the pressure on that we have to win every game.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously that's going to be Arteta's attitude. I don't know about fatigue. I think some of these guys with 3 or 4 weeks break and a bit of pre-season in them, I think they'll be okay. I don't think it's fatigue necessarily that's going to be leading things. And I still think that when we get to Wolves, you'll see a very strong side, even if some of the guys go to the final. If someone like Havertz went all the way to the final, you still got exactly a month there. I could see Arteta pushing him into action if needs be.
Yeah.
And the same goes for some of the other players. Yeah. So I'm not hugely concerned by.
Has that gone out the window these days? The idea that, if a player goes on an international break, remember Arsene Wenger used to say any player that's been away at an international tournament, he absolutely needs 3 weeks holidays. I think that's what he used to say. And there were times where we would start a season and, there would be players who've been away who weren't involved, at least definitely not starting games. But I do wonder if, as the way players are managed physically these days has altered that thinking.
Yeah, I don't expect Kai Havertz to come back with love handles and, a sort of beer paunch or something. He's going to be in fine fettle, I imagine. Also, a lot of the guys did actually get a couple of weeks break in between the end of the season and those international friendlies. We saw Havertz and Ødegaard kind of on a yacht together. So they have had some breaks. There will have been some downtime in between. I'm sure the clubs and the international camps will have been managing their workloads because they know all too well that these guys are being pushed. Also, not all of the players who are at the Euros and the Copa America are going to be playing 90 minutes every time. Quite a few of the Arsenal players that we've seen so far have been on and then kind of been substituted late in games. So when you kind of bear in mind that it's 6 fixtures over the course of 4 or 5 weeks potentially, it's not like Premier League level intensity, is it?
All right.
So we'll see.
All right. This one comes from KDale 0071. And he says, letting Matt Turner leave now seems like a bad decision. He would be a good number 2 to Raya, and we would have no dispute over the number 1 spot.
Disagree with the fact that it was a bad idea to let Matt Turner go. I think Matt Turner, lovely man, seemed very, very popular in the squad. Not a good enough goalkeeper for the way that Arsenal want to play. Couldn't play out from the back, panicked. I think you saw, even in his performances for Nottingham Forest last season, that when the pressure was on, he faltered. And unfortunately, Arsenal, if they have an injury to David Raya, that would be a disastrous situation, I think, having to rely on him to be the main guy for a long period of time. So I think I don't really understand what the thinking was behind the Turner signing, whether it was driven more by a kind of KSE desire to have some kind of United States presence in the squad ahead of a US tour. That sounds a bit cynical, but he just didn't seem like the right fit. Here we are, a football team who wants to play out from the back, and it's so important that the goalkeeper is able to do that and be calm and be collected about it. And he wasn't that presence. And the fact that Arteta even looked at Ramsdale, who was very good at it, and decided he needed an upgrade, suggests to me that there was some weird thinking going on behind that one.
Yeah.
And then, if you're looking for a number 2 now, I know that Ramsdale Raya situation caused a lot of ructions and angst and discussion, but I think it's been settled now. Ramsdale is the number 2 until he leaves, and then we'll just find another number 2 now, and that's fine. That's what other clubs do.
Yeah, I would strongly disagree with that one as well. the fact that Arsenal made some kind of profit on Matt Turner. I think he went for 10 million. We'd spent 6 or 7 million, which again seems very high for a goalkeeper coming from MLS. At his age, with the profile that he had, I think it was the right decision to let him leave and to make some money on him. And I think who we bring in to be the number 2 next season is going to be fascinating because he has to be able to at least come close to replicating what David Raya can do with the ball at his feet. And I wonder, is there a sort of baseline that you expect a goalkeeper to have in terms of what they can do with their hands? Can they catch? Can they make saves? But a key component of what Arsenal need to do in the transfer market this summer is going to be what they can do with the ball at their feet. So I don't know who that's going to be and who can you get who's knocking around. The Dutch guy is quite similar to Raya in terms of his profile with the ball at his feet, but he's a bit Kieran Tierney when it comes to injuries. He's made of biscuits, basically, by the looks of him.
I mean, I'm genuinely fascinated by the prospect. I mean, I know Arsenal are about to persuade Karl Hein to leave, but I don't think that necessarily means that he's around for the season. I think that gets us through pre-season because we have to have someone who's in goal. We can't just ask Cedric to hang around and stick some gloves on him. So, you know, they've let 5 youth team goalkeepers go. Arthur Okonkwo, James Hilson, Hubert Grasic, Ovi Ejaheri and Noah Cooper. That's 5 goalkeepers from the academy level. Right. So they're very light. I mean, the moment you need training sessions, they're going to need some keepers. So I'm curious to see where they're going to go and get someone from. Could we see a third choice goalkeeper come in, someone of a closer to our age? You know,
I hope it's not close to my age. Maybe your age, but I hope we don't bring in a goalkeeper that's anywhere close to my age.
I mean, that would be funny.
I mean, it would be, but not. It wouldn't enhance our chances of success.
Someone who's in their late 30s, pushing 40. I could imagine a kind of experienced head who comes in as a definitive third choice goalkeeper who is there to help with training and make up the numbers. Because otherwise, they're going to have to promote an 18-year-old to become the third choice keeper behind whoever, you know, comes in behind Ramsdale and Raya. Yeah. Or
a Mart Poom kind of character, yeah.
Mart Poom, let me just check. He may well actually be the age.
He probably is.
And he's basically Karl Hein's dad, isn't he? He's 52.
Right, yeah, there you go. Exactly the same age. So, yeah. All right, bring back Mart Poom. That's what we're saying here.
Done.
Swap one Estonian for another. Job done. All right, we've got it all sorted. While we're on goalkeepers, I thought this was an interesting one from Gunnar Z or Gunnar Z, depending, I guess. The goalkeeper 6-second rule is one you want to see enforced more next season.
Strongly disagree.
Right.
Only because I think we make very, very good use of calming situations down by having Raya lie on the ball like that. I think I could just about deal with time wasting in games, mostly. But that's only because I know we do it as well as anyone else, really. I'm not going to be stupid. I mean, I know Newcastle were very annoying a couple of seasons ago, but I don't know. I mean, the ball moves around relatively reasonably these days. I don't have huge qualms. I know there's a lot of like the ball being out of play stuff, but a lot of that was, you know, it's more the VAR delays and stuff like that that really get on my tits rather than goalkeepers potentially holding onto the ball a little bit longer. And the game's just different, isn't it now? Because a goalkeeper can claim the ball and then they can put it on the floor at their feet and they can wait there with it for a few seconds. And the rules don't dictate that you have to get rid of the ball within 6 seconds of the goalkeeper having it anywhere near him. It has to be within his hands. So it wouldn't make that much difference, I don't think.
I was sort of inclined to agree with that until you mentioned how good we are at time wasting. So now I'm going to disagree. But it does feel to me like one of those things that would be an edict at the start of the season, that they'd bring it in and say, goalkeepers have got to get rid of the ball within 6 seconds. Referees are going to crack down on this. And in the opening weeks of the season, we see fucking mayhem. We see referees giving indirect free kicks in the box or whatever the punishment is because they haven't got rid of the ball. And then it'll all be crazy. And then over time, they'll forget about it and everything else. I mean,
that's when 52-year-old Mark Poom gets his game time, though, at the beginning of the season.
It'd take Mark Poom about 6 seconds to get off the ground anyway. Give him a chance here, folks. I know how it is. You're not quite as supple as you used to be when you get to 52. I did want to just sort of... you mentioned VAR and delays of VAR. What have you made of VAR in the Euros? I mean,
it's pretty slick.
The difference is night and day, isn't it? It really is, like the speed with which decisions are made, even if you were inclined to disagree with them. And I don't think there's been anything particularly contentious. I remember one decision, and I can't even remember what it was now at this point. I remember thinking, oh, that doesn't seem quite right. But in general, I think the speed at which they come to the decisions that they make, it takes away any angst that people might have if they disagree with it. So, well, at least they've done it and got on with it and the game is going, but 4 minutes, 5 minutes later, as they're drawing lines with fucking MS Paint or whatever it is, it drives people crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the semi-automated offsides can't come in soon enough in the Premier League. Like, quite how we've got to a situation where we decided it wasn't a good idea from the get-go is, beyond me. But if that comes in, and it's not going to be straight off the bat, is it? This season? It's weirdly, they need some time to kind of get everyone. I don't get that though. They had it for the World Cup in Qatar, right? And I think the thinking is they want a couple of months of the season to calibrate the fucking cameras or something like that. That's what I read. That something. Mm-hmm. But they didn't have that for the World Cup in Qatar because a lot of those stadiums were just built and there were no games in them until the World Cup took place, and they had semi-automated offside, which worked perfectly well. So I don't really understand. Again, it's one of those PGMOL things that will, I think, at some point during the season become an issue because a semi-automated offside decision that didn't happen in August or September but then happened subsequently will become an issue for some teams, some managers, some set of fans. I mean, what I've really enjoyed about the offside situation is it just becomes less of a talking point, right? You just assume the technology has got it right. Interestingly, you can, the difference here is that in the Euros, it doesn't seem that any of the commentators have a kind of live feed that links them up to whatever's going on, so they don't know what the decision is.
That's true, actually, because I've noticed a couple of times there have been decisions in the games or things have gone in the games and the commentators have an idea of it and it's completely different from what's actually happened or what turns out to be the case. I don't know if that's commentators who aren't necessarily at the games or are they in studios or something, but that's happened a few times and it's been a little confusing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in England at the moment, what you have is they're telling people before the referee's almost even blown his whistle what the decision is being, that's been made behind the scenes. What I really want to get away from is kind of making so much of these incidents. I mean, in the Euros, what happens is the decision is made, the game continues, and actually you don't even get the replay for potentially 5 minutes, where they then show you the kind of computer graphic where it shows he's offside. I like that. It's like everything's moved on, everyone can forget it, and then, oh, okay, yeah, now I see where it was going on. Whereas we obviously have kind of Gary Neville kind of oohing and then sort of conspiracy theories start up and, social media blows up and suddenly everything's just kind of, it's all about that particular moment. I think, it's just, there's just generally been a lighter touch use of VAR as well. I feel like the thresholds are potentially higher and it just feels like it's a much more natural implementation of, helping and assisting rather than being the be-all and end-all.
Yeah, so. It's always been the implementation and the time it has taken to get to some of the decisions. And then even when they get to a decision, people are like, I don't trust that having spent that much time to get to that decision, you've made the right decision. I don't know if there's like... whether it's more trust in the officiating at this tournament or far more distrust of the officiating that we have in England that has changed it, but it feels efficient. I feel like the efficiency of the decision making takes away so much of what could or couldn't be contentious.
I think Tim mentioned something interesting on Twitter this morning, I think, or it may have been yesterday, that obviously what we have at these tournaments are the cream of the crop from a refereeing perspective. So you're getting the best referee from Italy, the best referee from Spain, and consequently we're probably seeing a reflection of the high quality of the officials, whereas on a weekly basis what we've got is the top 12 officials or something in action, and obviously some of them aren't as good as others, and there's it causes issues. So I think we're definitely seeing the best officials and the best refereeing and the most efficient use of VAR, and consequently you kind of look at it and go, okay, this is what it could be, but probably harder to implement on a week by week basis, but still there are obvious improvements that can be made.
All right, Cheesecake says Ethan Nwaneri will start 3 or more games next season in all competitions.
Strongly agree. I think this year is going to be the year that he starts to get a bit more time. I think it was really interesting last season when the players were the ones who were egging Arteta on to bring him on against West Ham. I think Jorginho was amongst that. Like, I think once you've earned the trust of your teammates, that's really something at that level. And look, he's 17, going to be turning 18. We've seen players come through the ranks who have been able to hold their own. You know, obviously Cesc and Jack Wilshere come to mind in that position in midfield, but other clubs have youngsters coming through. And I think the League Cup, God, if we could just get some luckier draws as well in the cup competitions, you know, it'd be nice to have a bit of a run in the FA Cup. I definitely feel like there's opportunities there for him. There's going to be football every 3 days with those Champions League matches between September and, January. So again, there should be opportunities. Obviously, starting games is a big call, but I think I could see him starting in the cup games and coming off the bench potentially. You know, it's pretty obvious that he stands out a long way above any of the other academy prospects at the moment. He's been pretty much the only one that Arteta's looked at. Maybe Miles Lewis-Skelly and has kind of been there and thereabouts, and a couple of the wingers, Charles Sago Jr., and we'll see if Kozia Dewberry sticks around. But I fancy Nwaneri to have a bit of a breakthrough this year. Yeah,
I agree. I think there's space in the squad for him, particularly if a couple of players depart and we're looking at the transfer window and the transfer market as a way to replace those. But I think you also have to create a pathway for a talent when it is or appears to be. Of course, we can never really tell 100% if a player is going to fulfill the potential, but certainly he looks like he's in that kind of bracket where he's a little bit special, and therefore you have to give careful consideration as to how you bring him in and how you develop him as a player. So I would be very surprised if he wasn't involved in League Cup games. I think you're right about the draw. The draw dictates so much about what kind of a team a manager can put out. Like, same with the FA Cup. I know there's disappointment about not doing enough in the cup competitions last season, but we had Liverpool in the third round of the FA Cup, and it was
and City the year before.
So
two hardest draws we could possibly get at a point when the odds of getting them were at their longest.
Yeah, exactly. So I think if we can get those early rounds against lower league opposition, or maybe even non-league opposition in the FA Cup, you never know, then he's got a great chance of playing. And I think as well, it allows a manager an opportunity to dip deeper into his academy and see what someone is like, on a really truly competitive match day experience. Because these guys train with the first team all the time. George Bird, you'll see on his Twitter a list of names, blah, 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 all trained with the first team. And that's the first step. And that's the first way of seeing, can they match the level? What are they like? Are they intimidated? Can they step up? But a match day is a different situation entirely, isn't it? So even if it is just, in inverted commas, the League Cup, to see what they're like in that context and how they react to playing potentially in front of 60,000 people rather than 60 people or 600 people at the most if they're playing at youth level, those are things that you can hope a player can deal with, but until such time as you put them into that environment, you can't be 100% sure.
I mean, I think we're in a situation with Nwaneri as well, where there's a sort of use it or lose it situation going on. And we also need to use him maybe as an example to some of the other guys coming through the ranks, that you can get into an Arteta first team squad, because while he has blooded youngsters, and obviously when he first came in, he didn't have much choice and he put, big emphasis on youth. Last season, the only under 21 in the first team squad was Karl Hein. And while we're a young squad, we're kind of, the average age is going up all the time. We're not bringing it down. So yeah, I mean, first things first, it'll be interesting to see if he gets the kind of formal promotion to the first team squad, I guess, in the summer and goes on the pre-season tour.
Yeah.
I don't think he did last year, did he? I think it was he had an issue with quite a bloated squad and wanted to take some of those senior guys like Cedric and, to the States. And I think we maybe only had one in there. It might have been Rule Waters or something like that.
I think so, yeah.
So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see who gets the nod, because there should be some space for them.
Yeah. All right. Chris BK says there will be another gate crasher, in inverted commas, a non-Big Five and Tottenham team who makes the top four this season, and obviously that's in light of Aston Villa doing it last season.
Disagree. I'd say I say disagree. It would have been a very confident disagree if Pochettino had hung around at Chelsea, because I feel like Chelsea were actually building the level of momentum and cohesion you need to actually potentially challenge for a top four place again. But obviously his untimely exit throws all of that up in the air again. I've got no idea what Maresca is going to be like as a coach at Chelsea. I mean, who have we got? It's hard to say what United will be like. Does Newcastle count as an outsider, having already qualified for the Champions League?
Potentially an outsider, but I think they sort of did a Villa. I think there was a bit more consistency about Villa last season than Newcastle the season they got into the top four.
Well, why don't I rule out clubs then? So not Ipswich, not Wolves,
No.
Not Everton,
No.
not Southampton, not Nottingham Forest. Maybe Bournemouth and Brighton but they would have to really go some and not lose players this summer. Can't see West Ham. Brentford can't see. Crystal Palace,
So much depends on Eze and Olise.
Exactly. And, they've had a nice little kind of new manager bounce, but can they continue that into the new season? And then it's Leicester, and I find it very hard to believe that it'll be a non-Big Six team kind of finishing in the top four. That's
one I strongly disagree with. I think the top six and maybe Villa are too strong. I know he did a great job last season, but I have something in the back of my mind about Aston Villa for the season ahead. I do wonder if, like Newcastle, when they qualify for the Champions League, they don't necessarily have a squad that's completely ready for it, and whether they can maintain European competition and Premier League competition, I think is open to question. I actually think that's one of the things that doesn't get talked about too much about Arsenal season last time around, was the fact that we were competitive all the way to the end. We did get to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. I know we were out of the cup competitions, but I think we managed those two competitions maybe a little bit better than I was thinking we might. And obviously we've got to improve again next season. But that's why I have a slight reservation about Villa.
There is a slight caveat.
What's that?
Obviously, the Premier League could have 5 teams in the Champions League if the coefficient works out in their favour.
Right. Over the course of the season. Over
the course of the season. And Man City might get relegated, so then there'll be like 2 extra spaces.
All right. Well, here's another one on that. Stickers says Man City will receive some sort of punishment before Pep fucks off.
Disagree, but only because I think Pep will fuck off before the punishment comes in. But I think they will get punished.
Do you think you're confident? Right.
He says, I'm confident that they'll punish them, and it will have to be quite a decent punishment, because the Premier League has not gone to all of this effort just to go, we're going to slap you on the wrist now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is assuming they're found guilty, and I feel like all of the evidence suggests, and the fact that they've been found guilty previously by UEFA suggests that they have done things.
They have done things. Yes,
they have done things that potentially they shouldn't have done. So, but yeah, I think Guardiola. I think this might be his last season. I think he'll want to leave before all of the shit hits the fan.
I mean, the shit could hit the fan before the start of this season, because there is this ongoing situation at the moment, isn't there, which is about Man City suing the Premier League. That's been going on behind closed doors over the last week or two, you were telling me. So
yeah, I think that there's been a hearing ongoing for the last 12 days or something. So we're waiting to hear what the result with that will be. If they win that, and that would actually probably blow up the case against them potentially. But
yeah,
I just feel like this is a sort of offensive Trumpian tactic on their part. I don't know how much they actually think they're going to be able to win.
Oh no, it's definitely tactical. It really is. But you know, they do have the legal might and the financial resources to make it very, very difficult for the Premier League. That's why I'm sort of inclined to disagree with the statement about City receiving a punishment before Pep fucks off. But you know, if something like this happened, if like out of the blue Pep said, I'm leaving, see you later, that would tell me that City are going to get done, because he will, like a rat leaving a sinking ship, he'll fuck off and then say, well, I didn't know, and as soon as I found out, I left, because you know, I'm such a good guy, so good. If that happened, then I'd feel confident that City were going to get done, but that's just a hypothetical, I guess.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Will your enthusiasm for the season and the next few seasons be affected if City are found not guilty? So ultimately, the juggernaut goes on unchecked. I mean, and Arsenal have to go against this.
It depends. I mean, are they found not guilty on the back of the 115 charges, or successful in their attempt to do away with these rules that they claim are unfair, rules that they're, completely aware of? I think if this hearing goes in City's favour, I would have some strong feelings about the way football is going to go over the next number of years. And I know this is like trying to put a genie back in the bottle, but if City and Newcastle and other clubs can just spend limitless amounts of money, which they would love to do, I mean, that is the reality. If the charges against City are upheld, it's because they have been trying to spend as much money as possible to make themselves a dominant force in English football, which of course they have done. They're already the dominant force. They've won 5 out of 6. But if they could do that unchecked, their only real competition is Newcastle, because Newcastle have even more wealth. You know, I can't sit here and say, well, that would be that. I wouldn't care about football anymore. What's the point? But there would be part of me thinking, well, what's the fucking point? Because there has to be some measure of fairness for a sport to be properly competitive, and it wouldn't be anymore.
I mean, I guess the only marker we've got is kind of Abramovich and Chelsea just spending completely limitless amounts of cash, it seemed, at the point when nobody else was run like that. And it did just completely swing things in their favour until obviously it opened the floodgates for other oligarch and billionaire owners, and this is where we've ended up today. I think I'd be quite downbeat if City either win this case that's going on at the moment, or even if they're found not guilty of the 115 charges that have been pressed against them. So I think it would feel like a bit of a gut punch. But I also think maybe collectively the league will be pretty furious. All the clubs and all the other fans will want to really go for City. So it could result in some interesting grudges.
Yeah, like in as much as there is integrity or sporting integrity in the Premier League right now as we sit here and talk about it, there would be none if City were to get away with it. And I think that is something that the other clubs and the Premier League themselves have got to work really, really hard to protect. Because if your competition is perceived to have zero integrity, it loses value, not just among the people who watch football, but, you know, sponsors, brands, all those kinds of things. Who wants to be associated with something that's as tawdry and whatever? I mean, there's always some, but like...
Yeah, just the betting and the cryptocurrency.
Just those guys, yeah. The betting companies that don't exist, their websites that don't exist, all those, they can pour millions and billions into it. Okay, let's do a few quick ones to sort of finish us out here. Jose, I don't know if he's Portuguese or Spanish. He says, Martinelli will have an 18-plus goal assist season next season.
Agree.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting interview he did yesterday.
Yeah.
AS ahead of the Copa America. Sounds really, really determined. Very focused. Obviously, he's not too dejected about the fact that last season didn't quite go to plan for him. But yeah, I think so. Yeah, I see him being an integral part. If we can settle down that left side, you know, get the players around him who build up the relationships he needs, I think there's definitely, you know, you can't write off Martinelli after the season.
No. I mean, even with the season that he had, which was underwhelming, he had 13 goals and assists in all competitions. Yeah. Not brilliant, but he can clearly do an awful lot better. So I think 18 plus goals and assists is well within his wheelhouse. Here's one from me. Kieran Tierney's injury at the Euros should make Arsenal think very carefully about whether or not they should pursue a move for Pedro Neto.
I think, yes, agree. You have to take into account a player's injury history. I mean, it would be ridiculous not to. There's no reason to think that just because you've joined another club that your hamstrings are suddenly going to magically become better. So, yeah, I'd be genuinely concerned. If you can't rely on a player, it doesn't matter how good they are. I mean, I think Kieran's a very interesting proof of that. I think he had every time he builds momentum, and even when he was at Sociedad this season, while he was playing really well, if you're suddenly out for 3 weeks, it really upsets everything, doesn't it? Because as we've seen, just talking now about Martinelli, if you don't have a settled team around certain other players, then it can really upset the balance of a team on the pitch on a week-in, week-out basis. So I would be very wary despite Neto's talent.
Okay. Tudor says, Arsenal should never join in on the multi-club ownership model, selling property to themselves to work around PSR, that kind of funny business.
I mean, we kind of are in a multi-club model. I mean, our owners own the Colorado Rapids in the States.
European, he did say, in fairness.
Okay. I don't know. It's hard to say. If it happened, I'd just go, yeah, you know, like this is what everyone is doing now. Again, It's kind of hard to shut it down, isn't it? I don't know. It's difficult. But then if you see other teams making, if it's an advantage for other teams, like City obviously have Girona amongst their kind of group, and they've been able to bed in players there and potentially bring them into their setup. You know, if that helps you win, and this is what everyone else is doing, it almost becomes ridiculous to just say, I'm not going to do it. I mean,
keeping up with the Joneses.
I don't know that it's on the Kroenke radar. I mean, it's quite a big thing to decide to go and buy another club. I mean, it's not just as simple as throwing a check at a situation and saying, we own you now. I mean, there's a lot of time and effort that has to go into integrating that and making sure that it's running well in its own entity. I don't think we will, but it wouldn't be a kind of deal breaker for me if they did.
Right. I would strongly disagree with it. Strongly agree with the idea that we shouldn't get involved in that, mostly because I don't think it's right anyway, despite the fact people are doing it. I think it's open to all kinds of corruption, financial and otherwise, moving assets and money around between clubs just doesn't seem right to me. The other thing I would say is that I think, it's taken KSE quite a while to get it right at Arsenal.
Yeah.
The idea that they would then stretch themselves to buy another club. I mean, people have often said, haven't they, about KSE that they're more of a real estate company than a sporting franchise company, despite the fact that they own, various outlets in the US. So I don't know that the expertise is there at the top of KSE to stretch themselves and buy a club in Spain or buy a club in France. And I don't think they should do that anyway.
I mean, ultimately, if they're looking for a return on investment, which they will do on Arsenal eventually, the money's in the Premier League. You're not going to get that buying some, a second-rate team in Austria or something. So
yes.
Apologies to Austria.
Of course. Is that your doorbell? No, not a doorbell.
That was an alarm.
That was an alarm. Okay, no doorbell music for you. Plastic No-No says, Arsenal will have a 70 million plus signing this summer. Disagree.
I think we're going to operate in a lower tier this summer. I don't know why, but I feel like if we were going to spend that kind of money on a player, we'd have already seen a proper link with someone, and it doesn't feel like we're operating at that level this year. I'm not seeing. I mean, the only big name that's 100 million plus really is Osimhen, and I just don't. No. I just feel like we're not. That's not us.
No. That's not us this window, for sure.
I think we'll be more in the 50 to 60 region.
Right. Which is still just below it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still big money.
It is just below it. Wise Marklar says, football is an incredibly simple game that gets overblown and overanalyzed.
Agree, says the two people on a podcast. 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning when there's no football.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely overanalyzed. I sort of agree, but at the same time, I think it is increasingly a more. I mean, the objective of football is simple. How you execute that objective is increasingly more complicated, though, and the more complicated it becomes, the more you need to analyze it. And there is a reason why, there are careers in football, people in football who are statisticians, who are analysts, who aren't necessarily, for want of a better term, football people, because I just think the way the game has gone is far more complicated than it was even, 15, 20 years ago.
Of course. I mean, you have to be a financial expert, a data analyst. You have to have a decent understanding of legal matters these days just to be able to keep up with half the stories that are in the back pages of the newspapers. I think even in the time that I've been working with you over the course of the last 12 years, the nature and the quality of the analysis of football is just extraordinary now. It went from, you just sort of picked up on a few bits and bobs of data that were available freely to some of the intense scrutiny now. And I think, while I don't always read all of the data stuff just because I don't have enough time, it's an evolving market, isn't it? I mean, they're still trying to hone some of the algorithms that are able to better explain what we see on the pitch. And one year, the data is used in one particular way, and another year they find a new way of explaining things. So I think it's really interesting looking at it, but it's not the be all and end all for me. Football's really about the emotion and the people.
No, sure,
the time spent with good friends and stuff in the stands. So yeah.
But I think for football clubs, though, they have to have a more holistic view of what's going on. You can't ignore the data. It is about emotion. It is about quality. It is about talent. But all of the things that help you put a team together that can be successful, you can't ignore all the stuff that's out there. You can't ignore the data. You can't ignore what data might tell you about a particular player who could be eye-catching, but whose statistics maybe tell you there's a weakness there that makes him unsuitable for transfer. All right, we're going to leave it there. Continue to enjoy the Euros. I know you'll be staying up late to watch the Copa America and all that as well. So, as ever, thank you very much.
No sleep this summer.
No sleep for anyone this summer. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed to Andrew. You can find him on Twitter. He is at @AllenSport, at @AllenSport. And thank you again to our Discord members for sending in their statements. Sorry we couldn't get to them all, but we got to as many as we could. Right. Let's leave it there for now. There is a big weekend of football coming up, and as I said earlier at the top of the show, we will be doing our best to cover as much as possible over the weekend, but we will be back on daily schedule from next week as well. It is patreon.com/Arseblog. For now, thank you so much as always for listening. Thank you for being here and downloading and doing all the things that you do with your ears and your index fingers on your phones, of course. We will have an Arsecast Extra for you on Monday, so please join myself and James for that. In the meantime, have a good one, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye.